great to get out here and practice again. Got great weather, for the last few days practicing, which has been awesome. It's fun, to be with your teammates and to be able to just work on things and talk through things and make mistakes, go back and correct them, and make plays and have success and just continue to build the foundation for our offense and for our team for 2022. And it is a lot of work because there is much that's new and requires going back to the basics. And so that's kind of what we're doing, and trying to make every day productive towards getting to early September.
As a super detailed guy, can it be a little bit challenging when it's a somewhat similar system, but the details change, and that kind of, you don't get to do a full reset, you have to take what you know and then tweak some of the edges?
I don't know that it really matters, being a detail guy or not. I think it's just important to go back and learn and put in the time and not take anything for granted and make sure that you're asking questions, you're spending time studying. For me, it's been a lot of time on flashcards, just trying to memorize plays and terms and formations and protections and just the rules around all those things so that it becomes instinctual. And you feel like an 8th grader studying for a quiz at school the next day with the way you go home each night and study. But that's really what it does take to come out here on the practice field and be able to just play instinctually.
How similar is this to systems you've had before, namely back in Washington, I guess, when you were with Kevin?
There are elements that are the same, but it's amazing how much things have evolved. If looking back to like when I was with Sean McVay in 2016, I mean, Sean's offense, to the degree that this would have similarities, has gone a long ways over the last 5 years, and there's been a lot of changes. The league changes, and there's been a lot of changes with that. So, and I'm sure if you were to, take a snapshot of any offense I've played in, if you look back 5 years later, there's always a lot that's changed because that's just the nature of things that you have to keep up with the times. So there's a lot that's new. There's foundational, undertones that are similar, but I just learn it all as if it's new and just got to learn it as the 2022 Vikings offense.
From afar to those changes within the McVay thing, or are you just so locked in during the season that you don't really get to see league-wide trends like that?
That's a great question. It's something I've always kind of done when I watch the coaches that I've worked with, when they're coaching. Just observing, hey, can I recognize this or that? And if I can't, what has changed? And you're reading between the lines a little bit because you don't have all the answers, but you can certainly observe, and with the TV copies, you can hear what's the words being said, and you can know when that's exactly what we used to do, and you can know that, hey, that's nothing like what we used to do.
What have you seen from BC, especially like mindset-wise, just sort of how he's weathered a year, obviously injured, and staying mentally engaged?
Yeah, Olabisi and Irv are two guys that missed all last season that I was expecting big things from. I remember in 2020 when Adam was out with COVID for 2 games, I believe, or 1 game against Carolina, and we really put Olabisi in the spot where Adam would normally be. And he just had a great game. He kept getting open. He was reliable. And I remember thinking that in year 3, he was going to take a big step and really show up. And then, unfortunately, he tore his knee in one-on-ones over here in training camp. And so I've always had a high opinion of him, and I think that in year 4 now, I do expect him to have a very productive year and provide a great deal of depth for us. So I'm excited about him. And then Irv, much the same way. I felt he was one of our most impactful players during training camp last year. And even in the preseason games that he played, I thought he made an impact and was making plays and putting good things on tape. And then he hurt his knee against the Chiefs, and that was the last we saw of him. So both those guys I'm really excited about. I think it's year 4 for both of them. Expect big things.
What's the best part of this current scheme that possibly previous schemes with this team you didn't have? What do you like the most about what you're seeing from this scheme?
There's nothing that stands out particularly. I think so many offenses, there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of carryover. It's really just a new way to call it. It's a different language to really say the same thing. And so you're learning a new language just as much as you're learning a new system. And that's really where the studying has to happen.
The studying with the flashcards has always been an effective method for you?
Well, it's an effective method, and it's been an effective method for me, but not one I've used a lot in the past. I was kind of chuckling to myself just the fact that that was how I was studying, because I thought, you got to learn it somehow, and if this works, great, But this is the first time since really 2014 when Jay Gruden was hired, and then back in 2012 when I was a rookie coming from Michigan State to Kyle Shanahan's offense. Those were the only other 2 times in my career maybe I truly felt like I was learning it from scratch. I guess you could also say coming here in 2018 as well. So you had those moments in your career where you're saying, all right, I got to really lock in and learn this. But there were other years where there were changes, but they were more subtle. And so this is requiring a lot of studying.
Now that
Because you've had a different offensive coordinator every year,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But this is a new coaching. It's not just new offensive coordinator, it's a new coaching staff. So
Well
what's
said.
familiar and what's different about that kind of transition?
I think it's terminology, the actual language you're using. There's times where I'll look at Kellen or Sean and I'll say, well, this is just so-and-so from last year, but I've got to put a new word to it. And they'll say, yeah, exactly. So I'm just, they are trying to learn the new language too, but they know the old language, whereas our coaches now may not. So you kind of right now are speaking in 2 languages so that we can get to the point where we fully mastered the new offense.
Change though, right? Like the scheme is going to be fundamentally different than what you guys did in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So it goes beyond just the code words and the words.
It certainly does, and I think 18 to 19 it changed. Going from the system we ran to then having Kevin as the OC and Gary Kubiak's influence, and then in 21 it changed. When you have some changes with the staff, and so there's always that evolution and of change. But certainly there are elements that are different, but there's only so much you can change. I mean, at the end of the day, you do have sort of these staple foundational pieces that are pretty consistent across the league.
you obviously spent your first 4 years here under Mike Zimmer, new head coach. I mean, what's the difference? Is there a different vibe here, or what have you observed over the past month in a different new head coach and staff?
I think more is similar than different. In year 11 now, when you just get in the rhythm of phase 1 of OTAs, phase 2 of OTAs, what you're doing, the time you're putting in, like out here on practice field, so much feels the same in terms of the rhythms of the year and the way you relate to teammates and the way you're studying and the way you're trying to fine tune and find areas to take another step as a player, as a team. Your mindset's pretty consistent year in and year out. I'm just always looking for continuous improvement and to feel like I'm getting better as a player. And every year I've stood here in the spring, I feel like that's happening. And so as long as that's happening, that's a good sign.
Anything different?
Oh, there's obviously changes. But I wouldn't say it's a big deal that I would be focusing on.
Do things feel more, harmonious though in some ways? I mean, last year here felt tight to say the least. Do you feel like more of a relaxed atmosphere, and the fact that I'm guessing that you and Kevin are talking more than you and Mike did?
I've always been somebody who cares about how things go, and as a result has butterflies going into it. And so you don't have to believe me, but I'm sitting up there drawing plays. We have about a 45-minute break before practice, and I'm sitting in the quarterback room just drawing plays, and I'm got butterflies in my stomach to go to practice. I mean, there's still a tension. You're being filmed, you're being evaluated, you're trying to take another step as a player, and so you always have a deep care and concern for what you're doing, and as a result, there you feel that tension in a good way, and so I don't think that'll ever go away, and I think it's never needed to come from a coach. I think it's something that just comes from within, to put a high standard on your performance and to expect that out of yourself at all times, especially when it's when your best is required.
Is the chemistry that you had developed with Justin and Adam and Irv, does that carry over when you're learning a new offense, or do you have to almost relearn the chemistry that you once had?
That's a great question, because I've really leaned on them. I find myself saying, it's much more difficult to learn a new system and learn new teammates. I've done that too, and I'd much rather be in a place now where, yes, I'm learning a new system, but I know what Justin Jefferson can do. I know what Irv Smith can do. I know what Brian O'Neill can do. I know what Dalvin can do, and so that's kind of fun, because you feel like, hey, we're all learning this together, but we've also played some meaningful snaps together too, and we've got some bank reps and some good memories on these fields together. So that's kind of a comforting thing when you're out there and you're thinking through the plays and the rules and you're not sure about this or that. But, hey, I may not be sure, but I got Dalvin Cook standing next to me. I'm pretty sure about him. So, that is comforting.
With the terminology, Wes was sharing a little bit of insight how they name packages and all this stuff. Do you ask them why on every single time? Why do you call it this?
Why helps me learn it. So I don't ask why to be difficult, but I say, now, if you give me the why, it'll help me memorize it. And they, to their credit, there was an intentionality, there was thought put behind why, the word is called this and why the word is called that. Sometimes more than I even thought when I asked the question. There's a backstory even deeper than I realized. So it helps me to learn it, knowing why.
Some funny or weird kind of backstories behind some of them.
Yes.
Asking various people, his dad or whoever, and it's because of a free safety here or that used to blitz. Any jump to mind that have been especially weird or fun to learn about?
It's hard for me to share information publicly about our system, and I'm always going to err on the side of just not sharing anything, just to be careful. But yes, there are some good ones. But I remember when I was a rookie and trying to learn plays, and Kyle Shanahan said, we're going to call this play arches, and we're watching The Greatest Show on Turf run it with Marshall Faulk. And I said, well, why is it called arches? Again, going back to ask him why. And he said, because they're from St. Louis, they ran the play the best, and the arch is in St. Louis. In 2020, we still called that play arches. I'd changed teams, changed people, but obviously Kyle had worked with the Kubiaks and there had been carryover, and it was still being called arches years later. So I'd called it other things with Jay Gruden and with Sean, but it boomeranged back to arches. And so I couldn't help. In 2019, I believe it was, when it got installed and they put it up, and I said, I've seen that play before, and they said it's arches. I thought, there you go. So, you learn these words and you learn these terms, and there's even a meeting where, you're calling it something different now, and you lean over and you're like, that's arches, but it's not arches anymore. So you just continue to go. But I joke with guys like Sean Mannion that, I'd love to have that film of Marshall Faulk running those routes, because it's pretty fun to be able to say to a younger player, hey, let me take you way back on these cut-ups to where it began.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you.